Yo, people, Sanjay Uchiha here, bringing you my review on Dragon Ball Super Episode 86. And my, what an interesting episode it was. So, getting right into it, the basic synopsis for this is, and Goku goes to Dende to find the location of Android 17. Goku finds Android 17, they catch up, there's a fight, and more talking, and that's your episode. Review done. But really and truly, yeah, all fun and joke aside, this was a pretty interesting episode. Pretty entertaining. It almost even felt refreshing in a odd sense, but in a good way. So getting into it bit by bit. So I think what made this episode good, and apart from what made it good, it also had its bad. And I can see a lot of people in the community bitching about the power scaling again, and for good reason. But let's see. So we get Goku at Dende at the lookout. Dende knows where Android 17 is, and of course, he pulls off something I never knew they could actually do, like the Guardians of Earth. And it's that they can actually move the lookout, which was. It almost felt out of nowhere. Like, I was expecting him to, like, just tell him the exact location, which he did, but and then Goku would have like just flown there, but that was out of the blues. So, what made this episode actually pretty good, part one, well, point one, is that they've already started to tie things together with the end of Z. I mean, with the lines we got regarding Oob, like it was as if as then they started to talk about Oob, they didn't mention him by name, but obviously they mentioned the reincarnation of Boo. But as they mentioned, started talking about him, I like right away I picked up it was they're referring to Oob. So them actually going ahead to try and tie things up with the end of Z, I found was an interesting tidbit there, which added to the the overall lore and obviously the continuity, which people might think is all over the place since Super. How should I even put it? Super does take place in between the 10-year time skip, but since they don't like explicitly state how much years have gone by, even though like if you look at other material you could tell, but generally speaking they don't tell like it's been a year since. I mean, apart from that one time with Hit, but whatever. So I found that to be very interesting. It was pretty cool to see them trying to tie up with the end of Z, and it makes me wonder if like after this tournament of power, if we'll be moving on to the end of Z material art and potential beyond that. So that definitely added to what made the episode interesting to say the least. And of course, Mr. Popo mentions that since Goku has been so focused on space and other universes and all that, he's been basically missing out on what the local talent of Earth and what's been developed. So obviously in this episode, in this context, they're referring to Android 17 and Oob. So that was interesting to note. So we get Goku actually he actually finds Android 17. Well, then they stops the lookout and Goku flies off. He finds Android 17 taking on a bunch of animal poachers, which he takes out with relative ease, to be expected, of course. And it's rare that the second, what makes episode actually good, part two, or point two, comes in, and it's really the character interaction between Goku and Android 17. And this is definitely what made the episode refreshing to me. Considering these two have never met, like I mean, Goku's heard of him, and Android 17, he knows his voice and other things about Goku. A lot of things, obviously, because Dr. Juro would have been studying him and passed on that knowledge to him. But it's interesting, you'd think Juro would have like passed on some like a image, like a visual image of what Goku looks like, but whatever. So we get some interesting character interaction between them. They're catching up. Um, Goku saying like he didn't think he'd even meet him really and truly before, and Android 17 was like it's basically the same. He didn't think he'd ever meet him, and it's basically at this point we just have the characters catching up, and them pointing out that Goku helps him get rid of the poachers, and then we have him catching up with like saying they never really got a chance to meet because of the whole Cell incident, really and truly. And we eventually get into the sparring match because, as we know, Goku's recruiting. He wants to test everyone before he actually recruits them into the team. And of course, Goku goes on to transform into a Super Saiyan. And I must say, the art in this episode, like for the fight itself, I don't think it wasn't all that. It was subpar, to be honest, and I think that's what really brings down this episode. Um, but what this episode does well, I think, is it's a good example of if you have great choreography but poor art for a fight, that it could still turn out well. And I think that's what we got as an end result for the sparring match in this episode. Like, the choreography was great, but the art wasn't so. There were some cool shots I've in the fight, like in my thumbnail here, the lower shot of Goku. That was, I found out the art and detail there was pretty good. Um, but yeah, we have Goku transform into a Super Saiyan. He's going up against Android 17, and from early spoilers, we had already known, but it's evident in this episode Android 17 has been training, and he even points this out in the episode as well. I'll get to the power scaling issues that people may have a bit later. But yeah, it's evident he's been training as well. They go on, they trade blows. The choreography is pretty decent. Eventually, Goku does transform into a Super Saiyan Blue, which he knows that he didn't intend to do. But at this point, he fires a Kamehameha. We get Android 17 using the Android barrier, well, NG barrier, whatever you want to call it, and it's a good throwback to the Piccolo versus Android 17 fight. That was pretty cool. Of course, they continue to trade blows. They eventually call off the fight though because Android 17 says he doesn't want to destroy the island, and Android 17 points out that Goku was still holding back, and as well as Goku pointing out that Android 17 was also holding back. So that's interesting to note. We eventually go into more dialogue between the two characters, where we see Goku telling him more about the tournament. Of course, before this though, we get to find out that Android 17 does have a wife and kids, and it's because of the resurrection of the by the Dragon Balls that he got a chance to actually do this. Um, of course, two of his kids are adopted, and one is, you know, biological. So that's interesting note, and it's interesting to note that he works away from home, so that's cool to note as well. Goku, it was kind of like a tease because Goku wanted to be introduced to them and wanted to see them, and Android 17 pops out a phone and just from a picture, but we don't get to see we the viewers don't get to see, so that was kind of a but Goku tells him about the tournament, and Android 17 just flat out turns him down, really and truly. Goku tries to persuade him by, telling the real nature behind the tournament, but Android 17 just seems pretty indifferent and really just doesn't care because he believes that if everybody's getting wiped out, like, oh well. That's literally his attitude. So, yeah, I think characterization of 17 here after all this time is. I think it's okay to say the least, but you'd think that he'd, be interested in protecting his family, so I think we probably might get more of that to see more of his character in the next episode because obviously this is a two-part thing. So that's it for this isn't it for review. Let me just cover this last section. So in terms of the power scaling, before anybody complains, Android 17, because I have an idea of the years, it's heavily implied that Android 17 has been training all this time, right? And let's be very accurate and specific here, he's not really an android. An android in this sense would have been like models like Android 16 and 19. He's a cyborg, so he's a modified human, so he can still train to get stronger. um Sorry about that. So if he's been training since the whole Cell incident, which is age 767, and if I'm to just estimate it, we are about in age 781. So let's say that's what 13, that's what 14 years, almost 15. if we take a character like 17 who's been modified to have, like, say, the potential of, say, Frieza, and then you give him 14 or 15 years to train, because obviously he was stronger than Frieza was, obviously, in the Android saga, and if you give him like 14 years to train, realistically speaking, I could see him being relative to Goku, or comparable to Goku. So I don't really have a problem with the power scaling here. And obviously, Goku wasn't holding. Well, Goku was holding back, sorry, as well as 17. So I think when you put it in perspective like that, I believe 17 could, like, it's reasonable. I don't think it's bullshit. Um, and I mean, compared to Frieza, who did it in like what, 4 months, I think 14 years, to say the least, is enough time for a person with like the potential of Frieza to train and become comparative to what Goku is now. So it's good to see that Android 17 will be a valuable addition to the Universe 7 team, and I love it. And I love that. And then just in conclusion, really and truly, I love the episode does a good job of trying to tie up things with the end of Z, the little hints and lines there. I love that in the first half of the episode. Um, I love the interaction between Goku and 17. That's definitely a seller for this episode. It makes it feel refreshing. The fight, as I said, the art in the episode wasn't all that. It was subpar, a decent amount. It wasn't anything to cry home about. I think it's the lowest, um, like, for this arc so far, it's the least best. It's the lowest on the scale in terms of quality where the art and animation is concerned. Um, but for good reason. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Were you excited to actually see Android 17 come back, interact with Goku? What do you think of the power scale? I know Super's power scale is basically shit, to say the least, because of all the. That's a video by itself, but yeah. But I think in this case, they did a good job of bringing him back and not making it be like some crazy ass full power up, like, say, Frieza per se. So that's what I have to say for this review. Let me know what you think. Um, look out for my Samurai Jack review tomorrow, and rate, comment, and subscribe, people. Let me know what you think. Sanjay Uchiha, and I'll see you in the next one.